Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In My Queer Body. I'm very glad that you're here for this week's episode with us. For those of you listening at home today, we are joined by Killian. Thank you so much for being here today, Killian. Why don't you go ahead and kick things off by helping us get to know you a little bit?
Hey, yeah, so my name is Killian. I am 23. I originally, from the ages of about 9 to 20, identified as FTM, but now I am identifying as non-binary and have been for a couple years now.
All right. And first of all, Killian is a sick-ass name. All right. That
thank
is
you.
such a dope name. And also, you're 23, I'm 23, same age.
Oh, nice, yeah. I just turned 23 on the 9th of November, so.
Oh, really? So you're, what is that? That makes you a Scorpio, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay. Where do you live currently?
Currently, I'm living in Central Florida. I was originally from the Midwest and have moved all over the country.
Okay, so have you ever stayed in did you stay in the Midwest for an extended period of time, or do you kind of move around pretty frequently?
I move around pretty frequently. The first time I moved away from the Midwest, I was about 6, and have lived in Virginia, New York, Oregon, Alabama, all over the place for a few years at a time.
Gotcha. Okay, so you've had a little bit, maybe not experience in the healthcare setting per se, regards to trans healthcare, but you've had experience living in several different areas of the United States.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's good to know. When did you come out? As obviously you said that you previously thought that you were FTM, but when did you decide, or I guess figure out is a better way to put it, that you were actually just non-binary?
Well, so when I was about 8, I heard about Jazz Jennings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so she was the first trans person that I saw in media that was, actively on TV and stuff. And
yeah, she had that show on TLC, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I watched much of that, but she was the first trans person that I saw, and she was a kid, and I'm sure that there was, backlash and shit even then.
Right.
But I saw that and I was like, oh, she's describing how her dysphoria affects her, and I'm like, I feel the same way. So,
right.
I didn't have the vocabulary back then, and I definitely felt more masculine. I remember getting quote unquote misgendered because I'm AFAB, so I would get called a boy, and I was very androgynous growing up and always have been pretty androgynous.
Right.
But it didn't make me feel bad or gross or anything like that.
You were like, wait a minute.
Yeah, hold on there a second.
Why does this actually sound kind of nice?
Yeah. And so when I was about 9, I came out to my sister and my friend, and I was like, I really want to do something about this. And so when I brought it up to my mom, she was not very supportive. She was just going through a lot and was not expecting such a big announcement, basically.
Right, yeah. Just kind of caught her off guard a little bit.
Oh yeah, for sure. She's not terribly conservative or anything like that, but
right.
Yeah, her reaction kind of sent me into a spiral, and I ended up going back into the closet for 7 years.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so I came back out as FTM when I was about 17 or 18.
Okay.
Got on HRT when I was 19.
Right.
And then have been off and on testosterone since then, for a total of about a year and a half.
Okay.
I did temporarily go off of testosterone when I was 20 because I was going through some mental health stuff at the time, and insurance issues and stuff like that, and I just wasn't feeling it. But then about 6 months ago, I was like, hey, I really want to get back on T. It made me feel so much better, and I ended up doing that.
All right. And would you say that, when you first started HRT and stuff, would you say that you experienced any sort of discrimination or any sort of just obstacles in general when you decided to either start HRT or when you went off and were trying to get back on, besides the obvious insurance issues? Did you notice any difference in the way that you were treated?
Yeah, I would say that mostly it was just really uncomfortable being in public, knowing that, I was trying to pass, especially, 19 and 20, trying to pass as male, and freshly being on hormones. And I would often get, misgendered and just, kind of, just the looks from people in
Yeah,
public.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like this person is obviously queer. Like, gotta discriminate.
They stare without staring, but you can tell that they're staring.
Oh yeah, 100%. And going off of testosterone, I felt like something was off, but I didn't know at the time that I was non-binary. It took me a hot minute to realize, but for a while I was actually like, am I actually like a girl? Like, what's going on? And yeah, so I was, for a couple of months there, I was presenting femme, and my voice is deeper. It's kind of going back into this weird, like, middle ground. Like, I sound like I'm on T, but I don't sound completely male.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, so at the time, it was definitely a little bit stressful because people would see me, and for a few months there, I looked more female. I'd grown out my hair a little bit more, and I was trying to figure things out. And it was. I actually did have a therapist who, when I explained that I had been on testosterone, he was like, okay, that explains the voice. People were people were constantly like, trying to figure it out, basically.
Damn, but if I had a therapist say that to my face, bro, I don't know what I would do. I think I would probably like cry. And then I think I would get a little pissed off. Like, what do you mean that explains the voice? What's wrong with my fucking voice?
Yeah, it was definitely a little uncomfortable, but my thing is like, dude, just be direct. If you got a question, at least I know a lot of trans people don't like being asked questions, especially if they're more personal, which is totally fair. Yeah. But for me, I'm just like, dude, if you have a question, ask me. Like, if I don't want to answer, I won't. But
Yeah, I think that's a very fair stance to take. I mean, obviously, I have a bit of a larger like platform, especially on TikTok, and YouTube more than my Instagram, I would say. Instagram is kind of a dying app at this point.
Yeah.
But I remember when I first started kind of growing my audience online, I would get so like pissed off and annoyed with all these questions that people would ask me, and they would be so personal. Like, do you have a dick now? Like, what is testosterone going to do to you? And I would get so pissed because I would be like, why do you care? Like, why do you care? Mind your own business. And then as I kind of grew up, I should say, and I kind of like matured, I realized like most people, they're asking those things because they're genuinely curious. They're not asking those things because they're trying to be a dick about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So at this point in my life, I've had enough exposure online to all kinds of questions. So I'm pretty much an open book about my transition for the most part. There are still obviously some questions where I'm like, you don't need to know that. But right. I can see where you're coming from about like, it's just, sometimes it feels almost as if you're the one who's having to educate people, especially when it comes to like doctors and therapists, and you don't want to be the one who has to educate them.
Yeah,
they're supposed to already fucking know.
Exactly.
But you live in Florida now, right? You said that you live down there now.
Yeah, I moved here originally in about 2018.
Okay.
Left briefly and then came back early this year.
Okay. I hate to bring this up. I know this might be a sensitive topic, and I don't want to get too political here, but I feel like it's something that should be addressed. I'm sure but as of this month, in November, the state of Florida actually signed a ban into place that eliminates gender-affirming healthcare for transgender youth. You obviously, I'm sure you know something about that at the very least. Have you seen or experienced anything like any sort of ripple effects from that, or have you noticed anything from younger queer kids?
Personally, I don't have any friends who are, under the age of 18, so I haven't in my personal life seen anything like that. But I have seen just an outpour of basically dread and just really crisis from young trans people, especially on TikTok and stuff, because like it was tragic. I was reading up on it when that was happening, and it just pissed me the fuck off because, like, who has the right, first of all? Yeah. But, like, I hate to say it, but I would not be surprised if we lost tons and tons of trans youth due to bills like this, and it's just, I think about when I was a minor and I really, really wanted to be on HRT. I wanted to be on blockers and stuff, and, I would do anything for it, but, if I'd had supportive parents or, the ability to, financially afford it and everything, like, and not being able to, go through with that for those who are underage and really, really need it, it's really detrimental. And it's just, I'm seeing more and more bills being passed that are just anti-trans and anti-gay, and it's not only disgusting, but it's honestly tragic, because I know that, there are going to be kids out there who just don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, it's like you said, when stuff like this is introduced at the rate of which it is being introduced at this point in time, several states and even, countries outside of the US are introducing legislation like this as well. Where I'm from, it's not exactly a liberal place by any means. I'm from, Middle Texas. But I thought that it was at least a little bit more accepting than, say, I don't know, someplace, real in the middle of nowhere. And yet I recently found out that the school district that I went to high school in has officially put a ban into place for any sort of literature or books that even discuss queer topics, like of any sort. So there's not going to be any sort of like queer or LGBT history or healthcare or anything like that taught in school. And I was disappointed when I found out, but I honestly was not surprised, just based off of the way that I was treated and other trans and queer students that I knew at the time were treated while we were attending that school district. It's really disheartening. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing, too, about just discrimination and bigotry in general, is unfortunately it seeps into every aspect of life. Like,
absolutely.
Like the medical system of all places, and the school system, like, not only erasing, queer people and queer history, but we all know, like, Native American history has been erased, and all types of, Black history, just people of color, and any kind of diversity that isn't, white, cis-het Christian kind of ideology is just being demolished.
It's honestly like, it's like you're witnessing history as it's happening, you're witnessing the kind of slow, this is kind of an ironic term to use, but the slow whiteout of anything that is not white in school and in the medical field, like you said, which, those are the two main fields that you would hope would remain as impartial as possible. Right?
Of course. Yeah.
And you and I, we're from kind of southern, well, you're not from Florida, but right now you're living in Florida, and Texas and Florida are very red states. They're very Republican states, very right-leaning. And I'm not sure if you've ever experienced anything like this, but have you ever had an experience where you went to a therapist or you went to a doctor, and for whatever reason, be it, their own bigotry, or maybe it was a religious thing for them, and they either treated you poorly or they just outright like denied you treatment or anything like that?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have, because
that's what I was afraid of hearing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I would be surprised if I met any trans people that hadn't experienced that to some degree, at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, because I've moved around so much, and a lot of that was because, growing up, my dad would get jobs in different places and stuff. But now it's more like, I'll have opportunities in different areas, and I move around and stuff. But either way, it's like, I gotta get new insurance. I gotta get new providers and stuff. And sometimes I've actually changed providers strictly because they've been discriminatory, or they haven't had any kind of knowledge or education on any topics that I need help with. Like,
right.
I mean, I've had my very first outpatient therapist when I was 18. I was really, really struggling, and I was like heavily suicidal. I had just come out of inpatient, and she otherwise was really nice and helped me with a lot of things. But when I finally came out to her and was like, look, for my well-being, I need to transition medically.
Right.
She didn't know anything about it at all. She tried to be supportive, but I was living with my mother at the time, and it was a really toxic situation, and she was against it again at the time. And
right.
So I was like, I ended up a few months later going back to her and being like, hey, I don't think I'll be able to medically transition right now. And she literally said something along the lines of like, Oh, well, I'm glad, because that would have been really difficult anyways, or something like that.
My God, baby. Like, come on, have some common sense. You know, read the room. Fuck.
Oh, I know. And there was, when I moved to Alabama, there was actually a therapist that I went to who compared my experience to moving from Florida to Pennsylvania. She said, what if you, like, you know, you live in Florida your whole life. You love oranges. They grow beautiful oranges there. And then you move to, I know, she said, you move to Hershey, Pennsylvania, because you hear that they have like really good chocolate. But then you get to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and it's not as good as you thought it was, and you miss the oranges of Florida. And I'm like,
what that got to do with me? What the fuck?
I know, I was so shook. And like,
that's such a strawman argument. Like, that's such a crazy comparison to make. It's literally comparing chocolate to oranges. Instead of apples to oranges, it's chocolate to oranges. Like, what the fuck does that even mean?
I know, and I don't know what she was like. It was a really bad analogy anyways, but I remember trying to stand up for myself and just feeling like she was not hearing me at all. I never went back to her, you know. I've had a therapist in Florida, actually. I was referred to her for one session, and I don't remember why. I think it may have been that I was moving again, and I needed my last session, but my normal therapist wasn't there or something. But I went to one session with this woman who I had never met, I didn't know anything about, and I walk into her office and I notice like crosses on the wall and a lot of a lot of that kind of stuff. And she was a really sweet woman, but you know, and I was like halfway into the process, I was like, okay, maybe I'll get out of here unscathed. Right. Maybe.
You started to have a glimmer of hope, and then
yeah, I got up to leave. The session was over. She was like, you know, I was heading towards the door, and she was closer to the door than I was. Right. And she stood in front of me and she was like, can I pray for you? And she ended up...
You've got to be fucking shitting me.
I thought, you know, and like, I'm the type of person where like, if you're not hurting anyone, if it makes you feel better, sure, go for it. You know, I was like, but I was expecting like, you know, her to be like, you know, God in heaven, you know, help this queer person feel better about
repent.
No, she was literally like, she hugged me and she ended up like for 5 minutes straight like praying, and just I remember just standing there like regretting my life.
You should have fallen to the floor and started like convulsing or some shit.
Oh my god, dude. Oh my god, that would have been great. I should have thought of that then. But yeah, I just remember like looking around the room, and I was like, you know, just crosses and religious stuff everywhere, and I was like, oh no, I've made a mistake.
Yeah, as soon as you walk in, you're just kind of like, it smacks you in the face with the realization that you're not about to have a good time.
Oh yeah.
Man, I can't believe she like actually like, she basically prayed over you. Like, she was holding you there. She was holding you hostage, bro. Like,
literally. I was like, at one point, like, she was going on for so long, I was like, you know, so much for separation of church and state, first of all, but like...
Yes, that's another point that I was about to bring up. I was like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah,
again,
I don't know
you're
how
supposed to
practicing.
be impartial in this type of field, in this field of work, you know?
Yeah, of course. And, you know, again, like, you know, if you have your own personal beliefs, like, that's fine, you know, as long as you're not literally shoving them down someone's throat while they're trying to leave a therapy session. But like, you know, just the fact that it was so interconnected for her. And, you know, I've been in hospitals after, you know, some pretty harsh situations, and like, I look around and it's the same thing, crosses everywhere, Bibles everywhere, and I'm like, dude, this is, it feels so culty to me, you know?
Yeah, and it almost feels like, at least for me personally, thankfully, I've never walked into a therapist's office and had crosses all over the wall. But, you know, whenever I'm speaking to someone, whether it's a doctor or a therapist or even just like a stranger, a family member, what have you, I always feel whenever religion is brought up, like I'm being pressured almost. Like, they're putting the pressure on me to put my faith into this thing. Granted, for the record, I'm agnostic. I'm an atheist. You know, I don't really believe in a god or anything like that. Maybe a higher power, but that's about as far as I've gotten into it.
Yeah.
And so whenever someone says like, oh, you should really just pray. Like if you pray, like God will help you, God will lead you to the right path. Like you said, if you believe that and you're not using it for, harmful reasons, you're not harming anybody with it, power to you, great, good for you. But as soon as you kind of turn the narrative on me and you tell me that I need to conform to what you believe in order to be happy, basically, that's where I kind of like draw the line. And I think that maybe that's probably one of the bigger reasons that there is quite a high rate of healthcare avoidance, especially in southern states or more red states, more right-leaning states, for trans people. That could be because of the fear of, if I go here, they might try to push their own beliefs on me, and I won't get the care that I deserve.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I mean, I've done the same thing. Like, to be fair, right now, I don't like have a lot of access to resources because just low income stuff. And it's unfortunate that, like, knowing that if I have an emergency or if I really need something, that I'm unlikely to get it covered. But at the same time, like, when I have had really good insurance before, or like even decent insurance, especially after like a lot of medical traumas that I've gone through, it's been really difficult to bring myself to go anywhere, even to these like mental health professionals or people who specialize in this or that, because it's like, I've done this before, I've been here before, and I've heard so many horror stories from others who are so much worse that I'm like, is it even worth it? Like, should I just like suffer with this? Because like, it'll probably be worse if I go to these people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it kind of feels like there's this giant what if like looming over you at all times, because it's like, yes, I am experiencing this and I probably do need to seek out help or treatment or what have you. But what if I go and, like you said, it just makes everything worse? Maybe not physically, maybe they don't physically harm me, but they could mentally or emotionally harm me in the sense of, the maltreatment, the discrimination and things like that. I even used to have issues at the fucking pharmacy of all places, where I'm literally supposed to be in and out under 10 minutes just to pick up my testosterone. When I lived in Texas, it seemed like, just a lot of the people working at the pharmacies almost like looked down on me, or maybe like pitied me, but not in the sense of they felt bad for me, but in the sense of like they kind of had like a holier than thou type attitude. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Or, before I had my name and my sex marker changed on my legal documents, it felt like there was a constant state of confusion whenever I would go to the pharmacy and I would show them my ID, and they would look and they would see that I had a prescription for testosterone, and they would be like, are you sure that this is like what you need? I would have to explain. I would basically have to out myself, every time I went to the pharmacy. And I remember a specific time where I went and saw my doctor, my endocrinologist, and she called the pharmacist right in front of me, literally refilled my prescription right in front of me, and was like, okay, you're good to go by the time you get back to where you live, because the clinic that I was going to was in Dallas, about an hour and a half from where I lived at the time. She was like, by the time you get back to your house, your pharmacy should have the prescription and you should be able to go in and pick it up. I was like, great. I get to this fucking pharmacy, right? And I went inside, and the pharmacist straight up told me that they never received any call from my doctor. They never received any order for like a refill or anything. Looked me dead in the eyes and told me that. And then they called my doctor while I was there, and my doctor was like, I literally just called you, like, give him his prescription. And then the pharmacist was like, okay, you can come pick it up tomorrow. And of course, when I went the next day, that specific pharmacist wasn't there. It was a different pharmacist, and that person was very nice to me, and they gave me my shit. But it's stuff like that, the disrespect from the pharmacists in the pharmacy world, I guess, in general, that I used to literally like miss shots, and when I was a student, or I still am a student, but when I was a student in Texas, the cost of living was a little bit higher because the cost of education was crazy. And so I would miss shots because I couldn't afford blood work, or I would miss shots because I couldn't afford to go have an appointment with my doctor just for them to refill my prescription. And so I would end up having to like find these back road ass like solutions, you know what I mean? I would have to borrow testosterone from my friends. Sometimes we would swap vials, and I would give one of my vials to my friend the next time I got my refill, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do my shot. And sometimes I would even dig through the what is it called? The biohazard container, for my old vials, and I would try to get my dose out of whatever was left in the old vials. Like that shit could have really fucked me up, using from somebody else's vial, taking somebody else's vial, or looking through older vials.
Oh yeah. And I've been there too. I mean, my my spouse has insurance and sometimes has to because they were also on testosterone for a while. They're also non-binary, but they've had to get me testosterone when I don't have insurance. I've had to give testosterone to friends who don't have any way to get it, and it's just like, I've been in the same boat with like, oh, well, this endocrinologist really needs my blood work, but I can't afford it.
Yeah, that shit's not cheap.
Yeah, you can't afford rent half the time. How are you supposed to afford that? And then,
exactly.
Not getting anything covered, having to fight with insurance, and this and that, and like been in the same boat with pharmacists too. It's insane because actually one of the last times that I went to pick up my tea, it was really frustrating because it was a 3 or 4 week wait because we went to Planned Parenthood to...
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, they were actually going through an overhaul basically and like hiring a bunch of new people and all this stuff. And it's also about an hour away. And so we made a day of it. It took... like 4 or 5 hours because they were so slammed. Damn. And they ended up sending it to the wrong pharmacy.
Oh,
they had to yeah, it was in a whole different state too. I don't know why they did
a whole different state.
Yeah, so that was
I can
a whole
understand
fight.
Like 2 blocks away, but a whole nother state. Fuck.
Yeah. So the town that I live in, apparently there's a plaza in Tennessee with the same name.
Oh, sure.
And for some reason they thought it was the same place, but they were slammed, and I get mistakes and stuff. So I called them back. They fixed it. My pharmacy kept saying, "Oh, well, your insurance or Planned Parenthood or whoever, hasn't worked it out." But I would confirm with those places that they had worked it out.
And it was the fucking pharmacy.
It was the fucking pharmacy, dude. Like, I swear to God, they would keep that shit. Like, I don't know. And I mean, I've missed shots. I've missed weeks before of, fighting with pharmacists, and not to mention especially when I was first starting tea. To be fair, when I was identifying as FTM and like within my first 2 months on testosterone, I was passing 100% of the time in public.
Right.
So like there was no reason for this, but like I would go to the pharmacy, I would ask for my tea, and they'd be like, "Here you go, ma'am."
Man, fuck off.
I know. And like even after my name was changed, I changed my name legally before this to a much more masculine name.
Okay.
And I have it changed again to be a little more unisex. But when I had a more masculine name even, I would go to the pharmacy, get it refilled, and they'd be like, "Here you go. Here's your testosterone, madam." Like, what who the fuck are you talking to?
At that point, they are willfully being ignorant or hateful. Like, they're doing it on fucking purpose.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
That's so fucking frustrating. Do you think that is, like, the main reason how the medical field is failing the trans community? Like, do you think that specifically is the biggest point that they need to look at and they need to work on? Or do you feel like there are actions that they could take other than that, or actions that people in related fields, even like lawyers and things like that, people in politics, do you think there's anything that they could do in order to kind of prevent events like that from happening to other queer people?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of things that could happen. The problem is, like, I think there's just so much discrimination, and a lot of it is due to a lack of education and a lack of like simple empathy and understanding. And I think that like a lot of the people in these fields either just don't give a fuck, or they are, bigoted. And I've always believed that if people were more educated on really most topics, there would be a lot more empathy and understanding. But because of like stigmas and just like, bullshit stereotypes and all kinds of stuff, religious reasons or whatever it is, like, there's this societal kind of like pressure and, kind of just unreasonable misunderstandings and expectations and all kinds of stuff. So I honestly believe that, like, yeah, it may be annoying to like have, be misgendered by a pharmacist, or like, and and that's nothing to scoff at by any means, but I
Right.
think it runs so much deeper in the fact that it does affect so many different, you know, school system and the legal system and the medical system, where
Absolutely, yeah.
all these places
It's like a sewer system, you know what I mean? Like it's so interconnected and it branches out so far and it covers so many aspects of trans people's lives. And I feel like when we talk about the therapist who prayed to you for 5 minutes, or the pharmacist who looked me dead in the eyes and said they didn't have my tea after I watched my doctor refill my prescription. I feel like there's also a little bit of responsibility on the people around them, their coworkers, their managers, their bosses, whoever they surround themselves with in their professional setting. There should also be a sense of responsibility to those people to speak out, like I feel as if professionals are a bit too complacent for my liking. They may say that they may have that little ally sticker on their window of their office, right? But if they're not actually speaking out and standing up for the patients that they see that are queer or trans, then I feel like it's all just for show, and that really frustrates me.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's another point that I was going to make as well. What you just said is just, I feel like calling people out and that confrontation, as uncomfortable and unfortunate as it is to even be happening, like it needs to 100%.
Mm-hmm. And I know that there are some fields of work. I mean, I hate to bring up the police in a context like this, especially because of recent events, but there's a saying in the police force, when one cop gets in trouble and another cop witnesses it, they say, oh, cops don't rat out cops don't turn on cops, back the blue, or whatever the fuck they fucking say, whatever their excuse is for not reporting misconduct, basically.
Right.
I feel like that is another thing that kind of bleeds out into other fields as well. Maybe there's a nurse out there who is purposefully misgendering or dead naming a patient, and there's another nurse in that same wing that hears it and sees it happening, but out of fear of backlash that they might face for standing up against one of their own, I guess we'll say, they just stay silent. And I feel like silence really is complacency in a situation like that. Like, we will not see any positive further changes until people start to have those uncomfortable confrontations, like you said.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that also goes for, people of color and, any kind of marginalized group of people, any group of minorities, like, and yeah, it's fucking uncomfortable. I mean, even sticking up for yourself is hard, but like,
of course, yeah.
I personally find it a lot easier to stick up for the queer people and the people of color around me than, me as a queer trans person,
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's still like, the more that people realize that it's not okay, it's not just freedom of speech or whatever, it is hate speech.
Of course,
it's not
freedom
okay,
of speech does not cover bigotry. Like, that's not freedom of speech. That's just you wanting to be a dick without consequences.
Of course. And, I think, at a base level, like, I think there's such a lack of understanding that, like, we're all the same to a degree. We're all human.
Right.
And, like, obviously our experiences are vastly different, but that's all the more reason to try to understand and learn and, acknowledge each other's struggles and differences, because, like, that nurse who misgendered a patient and another nurse hears it, you both may be nurses, but the patient isn't any more below you. Like,
right, yeah.
That's still a human being,
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. And I feel like we've covered a lot of really great topics today. Do you have any further points or closing remarks or any questions for me or anything like that before we sign off?
Really just, my whole thing is, just if to anybody out there listening, really, I guess, if anybody is struggling with something, especially like if there's a group of people that is being hurtful, or if something is happening that isn't okay, like, just speak up about it. Like, human to human, it's really important that we look out for each other and we care for each other. And if there's any form of authority, even, like, it doesn't matter. Like, we need to, everyone deserves the same rights that anyone else does. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, like, that's pretty much my whole point. And I don't know, it's been great talking, and it's been great listening to the podcast so far. And yeah, it's been awesome meeting you.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Again, I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today, giving me your thoughts and talking about your experiences. It means a lot that you agreed to be here with me. To everyone listening at home, I'd like to thank you once again for tuning into this week's episode of In My Queer Body. I hope you've been enjoying the podcast as much as me and my guests have been. And if you have been enjoying it, why not show it to your friends or people who feel the need to hear what we're talking about? Say, if you have a therapist that treated you like ass one time, send them this episode. Tell them, hey, listen up. You were a dick. You need to hear this. Why not? Let's have those uncomfortable conversations. Let's have those uncomfortable confrontations and make some real change. Share the link to this podcast, this post about it on your social medias. I would really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate it as well. Thank you so much once again for listening, and I will see y'all in next week's episode.